The urban legends of the pineal gland. Is it a real possibility or just a figment of humanity's imagination? A mere urban legend? Is this rumor ultimately a good thing or a bad thing? Tonight, once again, we'll examine whether it's true or not from a Japanese perspective. There is an organ inside your brain the size of a grain of rice that sits at the geometric center of your skull. It is the only structure in the entire brain that is not duplicated, not mirrored left and right like everything surrounding it. One single object, positioned at the exact midpoint between your two hemispheres, as if it were placed there on purpose. Every ancient civilization that left written records mentioned it. The Egyptians encoded it into their most sacred symbol. Descartes, the man who built the foundation of modern Western philosophy, called it the seat of the soul and refused to change his position for the rest of his life. Modern neuroscience says it regulates your sleep cycle, and that answer is technically true. But it is also one of the most incomplete answers in the history of science. Because here is what the textbooks don't tell you. The pineal gland contains photoreceptors, the same structures that exist in your eyes. In a gland sitting in total darkness at the center of your skull, it maintains an active neural connection to your visual cortex. It produces DMT, the most potent psychedelic compound known to science, and the only one made naturally inside the human body. And it calcifies, progressively, measurably, and at an accelerated rate, in response to a substance that has been added to the American public water supply since 1945, that a biological eye that sees in the dark. A psychedelic factory in your skull, an organ every ancient civilization called sacred, and a modern public health policy that may be shutting it down. What is the pineal gland actually for? And why does the full answer feel like something you were never supposed to find? Part 1. Introduction. Most scientific mysteries are hard because the answers are complicated. This one is different. The pineal gland is not poorly researched. The literature on it is extensive, detailed, and published in credible peer-reviewed journals. The photoreceptors are documented. The DMT content is documented. The fluoride accumulation is documented. The neural wiring to the visual cortex is documented. None of it is secret. All of it is accessible. What is missing is the synthesis. The willingness to look at everything this gland does, not just the melatonin, and ask the question that the combined evidence is clearly pointing toward. That question is this: is the pineal gland a sensory organ? Not metaphorically, literally. Is it a receiver, tuned to something that ordinary perception cannot access, that the human brain has been carrying since before recorded history? The ancient world thought so. Cutting-edge psychedelic research is beginning to think so. And somewhere between those two data points is an answer that the current mainstream framework has been, at minimum, in no hurry to reach. Tonight we go looking for it. Part 2. Background. The pineal gland gets its name from the Latin word for pine cone. Pinea, because that is precisely what it looks like. A tiny pine cone, deep red, sitting in the center of the brain. It is part of the endocrine system. Unlike most brain structures, it sits outside the blood-brain barrier, the membrane that tightly regulates what enters brain tissue. This means it is directly exposed to everything circulating in the bloodstream. It also means it receives one of the highest blood flow rates of any organ in the body, second only to the kidneys. In simpler vertebrates, frogs, lampreys, certain lizards, the pineal gland is not an internal organ. It sits near the surface of the skull. It has a lens. It has a cornea. It has retinal cells. It is called the parietal eye, and it functions as one. These animals have a literal third eye on the top of their head, and it sees. In mammals, it moved inward during evolution. The lens disappeared. The cornea disappeared, but the photoreceptors did not. This is published, peer-reviewed neuroscience. The human pineal gland contains cells structurally identical to the rod and cone cells in your retina. They express the same light-sensitive proteins. They are connected through active, maintained neural pathways to the brain's visual processing centers. There is an eye inside your skull. It moved inside millions of years ago, and it is still wired to your brain as if it still expects to see something. The question nobody in mainstream neuroscience has been able to cleanly answer is, what? Part 3. The complete story. Ancient Egypt. The blueprint and the symbol start here, because this is where the story begins, and because this detail alone should stop you cold. The Eye of Horus is one of the most recognized symbols in human history. It appears throughout Egyptian art, architecture, and religious practice for thousands of years. It represents divine sight, protection, and the threshold between the living world and whatever lies beyond it. In the early 20th century, researchers comparing the Eye of Horus to cross-sectional brain anatomy noticed something that did not look like coincidence. When the symbol is overlaid on a mid-sagittal cross-section of the human brain, the anatomical correspondence is precise. The pupil of the eye aligns with the pineal gland. The curved markings beneath it trace the path of the brain stem. The stylized tail matches the position of the thalamus and hypothalamus. The Egyptians had encoded the internal architecture of the human brain into their most sacred symbol and placed the pineal gland at its center, without surgery, without imaging technology, without any neuroanatomy in the modern sense. How did they know what was inside the human skull? Descartes and the seat of the soul. Fast forward to 17th century Europe. René Descartes is the man who essentially built the philosophical framework of rational inquiry that Western science still operates within. He is best known for one line, "I think, therefore I am," and for his insistence on doubting everything that could not be rigorously demonstrated. This same man studied the pineal gland extensively and concluded, in published work he defended until his death, that it was the principal seat of the soul, the single point in the physical body where the non-material mind makes contact with matter. His reasoning was anatomical and logical. The soul, he argued, is unified, a single point of experience, not divided. Every structure in the brain is duplicated, mirrored across two hemispheres, except one. The pineal gland is the only unpaired structure in the brain. It sits at the center, with access to both hemispheres simultaneously. His contemporaries thought he had lost his scientific rigor. The claim was quietly set aside by the generations that followed, but Descartes did not abandon it. A man who built his entire intellectual reputation on skepticism examined this gland and became convinced it was the most important structure in the human body. That conviction deserves more than a footnote. 1990. Rick Strassman and the compound that changed everything. This is the moment the story becomes something that science has not been able to put back in the box. Rick Strassman is a clinical psychiatrist and professor at the University of New Mexico School of Medicine. He is not a fringe researcher. He went through the full NIH approval process, the first scientist in 20 years to receive federal clearance to conduct clinical research with psychedelic compounds. Between 1990 and 1995, he administered intravenous DMT, dimethyltryptamine, to 60 volunteer subjects in a controlled medical setting. DMT is classified as a Schedule I controlled substance. It is also produced naturally inside the human body. It has been detected in human blood, lungs, cerebrospinal fluid, and pineal gland tissue. What his subjects reported was not diverse. It was not random. Across 60 subjects, across hundreds of sessions, the experiences converged on a specific and consistent set of descriptions. Subjects reported entering a space that felt more real than ordinary physical reality. Not less real, more. They reported encountering intelligent, non-human entities that were aware of their presence. They reported receiving information from sources they could not account for. They reported, almost universally, the absolute conviction that what they were experiencing was not a hallucination, that something was actually there. These were not confused individuals. They were screened, cognitively intact volunteers who could describe their experiences with precision before and after, Strassman published his findings in 2000 under the title DMT, the spirit molecule. The central question of his research was simple: what is DMT for? Why does the human body produce an endogenous psychedelic compound? What biological function does it serve? The official scientific answer, 25 years later, is still, we don't know that a compound produced naturally by the human body generates, reliably, repeatedly, across diverse subjects, encounters with what people describe as non-human intelligence. And the organ that produces it, in high concentrations, is the same organ that every ancient civilization called the seat of spiritual perception. The mainstream scientific response to this convergence has been, effectively, to study the pieces separately and avoid assembling them into a conclusion. The fluoride discovery, the part that should have made headlines in 1997. British scientist Jennifer Luke completed her PhD dissertation at the University of Surrey on fluoride's effects on the pineal gland. Her findings were specific and measurable. The pineal gland accumulates fluoride at a higher concentration than any other organ in the human body. Higher than bone, higher than teeth, the organs that fluoride is supposedly in the water to protect. The pineal gland of an average American adult contains the highest fluoride concentration of any tissue they carry, and fluoride, her research demonstrated, inhibits the pineal gland's production of melatonin. Its known, documented primary function. The United States began adding fluoride to public drinking water in 1945. The practice has continued as official public health policy ever since Luke's research was peer-reviewed. It has been cited in subsequent scientific literature. It has produced essentially no change in water fluoridation policy. Now hold that fact next to the DMT research, next to the ancient record, next to the photoreceptors, and ask yourself if the pineal gland is doing something more significant than sleep regulation. If it is, in some functional sense, a biological receiver for a form of perception that ordinary science does not have a framework for, then systematic fluoride accumulation in that specific organ is not simply a dental health side effect. It is the progressive, measurable chemical suppression of that function. Whether that is intentional or incidental is the question. But the effect is the same either way. Part 4. Theories. The mainstream endocrinological theory, the standard scientific position. The pineal gland produces melatonin, regulates circadian rhythm, and contains photoreceptors that are evolutionary remnants from the period in vertebrate history when the gland was a surface eye. These photoreceptors no longer serve a functional purpose in humans. DMT is present in trace quantities whose physiological significance is unclear. The gland's central position is anatomical coincidence. This is coherent. It is supported by substantial research. And it has one specific problem that it cannot resolve. Vestigial structures in the brain do not maintain expensive active neural wiring. The metabolic cost of maintaining a connection between two brain regions is real. Evolution eliminates costly structures that serve no purpose. The visual cortex connection to the pineal gland is not vestigial. It is active and maintained. Something is using that connection. The mainstream theory doesn't say what. The biological transducer theory. This is the position that Strassman's research points toward and that a growing number of neuroscientists are beginning to approach. Carefully, in the incremental language of peer-reviewed caution, the theory, the pineal gland is a sensory organ. The photoreceptors detect something, a form of electromagnetic signal outside the ordinary visible spectrum. The DMT production mediates the conscious perception of that signal. The result is the category of experience that practitioners across every major ancient spiritual tradition described as transcendent or visionary perception. This requires no supernatural mechanism. It requires only that there exists a signal the pineal gland is specifically tuned to detect, and that DMT is the neurochemical translation of that signal into conscious experience. What the signal is, and where it originates, this theory does not yet specify. That is not a weakness. That is where the research frontier currently sits. The suppression theory, the conspiracy framing. Human beings possess a biological organ that functions as a perceptual receiver for something beyond ordinary sensory experience. Ancient civilizations knew this, built practices around it, and encoded it in their most sacred art. Modern psychedelic research has independently confirmed what those practices produced. And since 1945, the substance primarily responsible for the calcification and functional decline of that organ has been added to the public water supply. The non-conspiracy framing. Fluoride was added to water for legitimate dental health reasons. The pineal calcification is an unfortunate side effect, and the correlation with the ancient record and DMT research is real, but does not require intentional suppression to explain. The documented facts sit between these readings. Your interpretation depends on how much deliberate agency you attribute to the pattern. What is not interpretation is this. The function of this gland has been declining, measurably, in the American population for 80 years. And the research identifying the mechanism of that decline has not produced a policy response. Part 5. Deep Analysis: 3 Contradictions that don't have clean answers. First, the photoreceptor wiring. The brain does not maintain metabolically expensive neural connections without reason. The visual cortex connection to the pineal gland is active, identifying it as vestigial while it remains functionally connected to visual processing is not an explanation. It is a placeholder for 1.2, the DMT convergence. In 2019, researchers at the University of Michigan published findings in Scientific Reports, a Nature journal, demonstrating that rat brains produce a surge of DMT at the moment of cardiac arrest. This provides a neurochemical mechanism for near-death experience. The paper has been cited hundreds of times. It received almost no mainstream media coverage. The implication that the brain releases a psychedelic compound at the moment of death, generating the experiences that near-death survivors report, is either the most significant finding in the neuroscience of consciousness in decades, or a coincidence so complete it becomes its own kind of mystery. Third, the ancient record. The Eye of Horus correspondence. The Vedic Ajna Chakra. The Greek third eye. Descartes. The pine cone symbols in Egyptian, Babylonian, Assyrian, Mesoamerican, and Vatican art. These civilizations had no shared scientific tradition, no documented contact that would account for this specific symbolic convergence. The policy response in the United States remains unchanged. The James Webb Space Telescope, meanwhile, is finding planets with atmospheric signatures that may indicate biological processes. The question of what human perception is capable of, and whether it extends beyond the 5 senses that the current paradigm recognizes, has never been more relevant to the broader scientific conversation about the nature of mind, consciousness, and what it means to perceive. The pineal gland sits at the center of all of it. A rice grain-sized structure that ancient civilizations called sacred, that modern neuroscience calls a melatonin gland, and that current research is suggesting might be something that neither description fully captures. The tools to understand it exist. The research is ongoing. The question is whether the institution of mainstream science will follow the evidence wherever it leads, or whether it will continue to study the pieces in isolation and avoid asking what they add up to. Part 7. The final question: there is a carved stone pine cone, approximately 4 feet tall, standing in the center of the Vatican's courtyard of the pine cone. It is one of the oldest objects in Vatican possession. Pine cone symbols appear on the ceremonial staffs of Egyptian pharaohs, in Babylonian relief carvings, in ancient Greek art, in Mesoamerican sculpture. Every major ancient civilization that left records carved pine cones into their most sacred contexts. They were all describing the same organ. They all considered it the most important structure in the human body. And they all developed specific practices, meditation, breathwork, ritual, isolation, designed to activate something in it that they believed constituted the highest form of human perception. That organ is in your skull right now. It contains photoreceptors wired to your visual cortex. It produces the compound that clinical research has shown generates contact, whatever that means, with something that subjects consistently describe as more real than ordinary reality. And it has been accumulating the primary substance responsible for its own calcification since the year you were born. I'm not going to tell you what to conclude from that sequence. I'm asking you to look at it. The ancient record, the photoreceptors, the DMT research, the fluoride accumulation, the policy silence, and decide what you think it means, because the gland belongs to you. The question of what it's actually capable of belongs to you. And whatever the answer turns out to be, the fact that we are still asking it, right now, in 2025, about an organ that ancient civilizations called the gateway to something beyond ordinary reality, that fact alone should tell you something. What do you think the pineal gland is really for? And if its function has been declining in all of us, by accident or by design, what would it mean to get it back? Let me know in the comments. This has been ULW Radio. We'll see you in the next legend.